Welcome. Thank you for attending today's webinar. Our expert panel will bring an environmental discussion to life, including information on impact opportunities in the field of sustainability. In terms of the interactive format for this webinar, open your chat box in the Zoom platform to interact and ask questions for the Q&A segment. If you want to submit questions only to our panel, make sure to choose panelists at the bottom of the chat box before you hit enter. Great, let's get started. My name is Cindy Satterfield. I am the Senior Programs Manager of Smeal Alumni Career Services. Our mission is to connect Smeal alumni with engaging professional opportunities to advance their careers. Our monthly webinar program is just one of the many services we offer Smeal alumni. We also have one-on-one career coaching, a Nittany Lions career job posting portal, Penn State Alumni Engagement Network, LionLink, virtual events through our Smeal Business Club in Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, New York, Washington, D.C., and State College, Smeal Alumni LinkedIn groups, and also Smeal Lifelong Learning podcast episodes. Additionally, we are offering digital executive leadership programs through Experiential Insight. Please see our website listed on the slide for information on how we can help you amplify your career. Today, we welcome Smeal alumnus Bill Flederbach, the CEO of ClimeCo Corporation, Erik Foley, Smeal's Director of Sustainability, and our own Smeal ACS career coach and Assistant Director, Jennifer Nicholas. Thank you all for being here today. Since we have a panel, I'm going to turn the program over to them.
Great. Thank you so much, Cindy, and everyone. It is a beautiful day here in Happy Valley, and I hope it's beautiful where all of you are too. I thought we could begin today with some clarification of key terms. Erik, can you help kick us off here with explaining how these key terms relate to our understanding of sustainability in the workforce today?
Sure. Thanks, Jennifer. Great to be with you. And Bill, thanks, Cindy, so much for the great introduction also. But I think to put it in context, before I mention a few of them, I think I would just like to say that I think business has always had an impact. Right? Business has always had an impact just by providing goods and services, providing tax revenue, providing jobs. So I just wanted to make that point. I think what we're talking about today is that there's a new generation of young people and mid-career folks, later career folks that are also seeing that perhaps some of the ways that we did business in the past have also created opportunities for greater impact than the kind of the basic impact that business would have in all cases. And then the other thing I want to make sure I mention is that, I think to talk about impact careers at a time where we've had historic unemployment is to do so, I think, with great humility. So I think we would all agree that just to have any job can have a great impact on your family and your community. So I just wanted to sort of set that out there. So impact. I'll mention just a few things. There's quite a laundry list of I think terms. One that is that you'll hear a lot is ESG. ESG. So ESG stands for environment, social, and governance, and it's basically it's a term that comes out of primarily the investment field and financial management field as a way for investors to look at the risk profile of a potential investment. Right? They can look at the environmental performance and risk profile, the social kind of impact, and then the governance. And governance has to do with things like the diversity and inclusivity, but also the decision-making processes of the board. So ESG is primarily used in the financial area. Sustainability. So sustainability you often hear used also. So sustainability really goes back to 1987 and the Brundtland Report that came out of work of the UN. And it really was looking at the macro level of the fact that we had economic growth, which was a good thing, but we also had some issues with increasing poverty and inequality. That is, the wealth that was being created wasn't broadly shared. And we also had the issue that even though we had economic growth, we had environmental degradation. That is, we were kind of burning our natural capital at a rate that was unsustainable. So they started to call it, well, we should do something sustainable. We'll call it sustainability. And this is where the triple bottom line came from, which John Elkington came up with in the early 1990s that had to do with not just the financial bottom line, which we think we all know about, but also the social bottom line, social impact, addressing inequalities and injustices, but also in poverty, and also the environmental piece also. And then I'll just lastly mention, you also hear corporate social responsibility and social responsibility more broadly, impact investing, other pieces. I would just say that corporate social responsibility is sometimes used in exchange with sustainability, or they're interchangeable in many ways. What I personally see in a lot of companies is that corporate social responsibility is more often than not the responsibility of the foundation. So you have a company, the profit-making enterprise, and then a foundation is set up on the side to do the corporate social responsibility piece, which is sort of philanthropic in nature. So I hope that provides some context and just a slice of the top of what some of the more, I think, common phrases are that go along with this topic.
Yes, I think that's very helpful, Erik. Thank you. So at the beginning of a career transition, I want to emphasize that we support people in the process of self-exploration and discernment and market research, which really need to go hand in hand. Can't even begin to understand ourselves in a vacuum, right? And that's part of why we're so fortunate to have you two here as experts today. I think a key point here to remember is that you reach self-clarity not through sitting around thinking about it, but getting out there, conducting research, taking on new projects, talking to people, and then reflecting on those experiences. So I'm very happy to have Bill with us here today. And he's now going to be sharing with you more about his story. And it's a wonderful story, so I encourage all of you to settle in, listen, and enjoy.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks, Erik. Really enjoyed being on the panel. Thanks, Cindy, for putting all this together. It's amazing. When Erik was talking about jargon, I was almost laughing because we have this whole acronym book in the climate space, and it keeps growing. Carbon, people talk about carbon or carbon neutral, but what is carbon? Well, there's a lot of greenhouse gases that make up carbon. It's kind of the common denominator. We hear net zero, carbon negative, what's your carbon intensity, which is how much CO2 equivalent you emit per unit of product produced. And the list goes on. It's just amazing. It's hard to keep up with it. But just a little bit about my story and how I, came into ClimeCo and started ClimeCo and the path into entrepreneurialism and in the business field. So my background is pretty technical. That's me actually standing next to one of the systems that we designed and installed. And I'll tell you about that. Like, how did I get to stand on that platform? Why was I actually installing a technology that would reduce greenhouse gases when it's not even regulated? So that's kind of the end result of my path. But I was an undergraduate in meteorology at State College. I started off at a branch campus that doesn't even exist anymore. In '86, I started off at the Lehigh Valley campus, which now it changed locations, so it's not there anymore. So I've been at this for a while. It took me 5 years to get through meteorology, just simply because I was a little unfocused early. Had some fun and had to decide what I wanted to do. So meteorology is what I was passionate about. I was interested not in forecasting the weather. I knew that wasn't my career goal, but I did like atmospheric physics and atmospheric chemistry and thermodynamics and all that fun stuff. So, that's kind of where I got into, looked at a job board at the Walker Building after I graduated in 1991, and a company posted there. I applied and I got a job, and it ended up being a 16-year career for me in the consulting environmental world. The initial job was really in this little silo of doing computer models to simulate air pollution impacts from industries to support industrial growth and air permitting. And God, I didn't want to be a dispersion modeler my whole life. It was kind of fun initially, but sitting in a cube running computers that y'all wouldn't even recognize today. They were so tiny at the time, but that was where I started. But I realized I had a passion for people and strategy. And what I did like about consulting is that we touched upon so many industries, across, this was a North American centric company, but I got to meet a lot of people, work in a lot of different sectors. I wasn't pigeonholed in one industrial sector. And that was fun. But one thing I realized pretty early on is that I didn't want to sell time. Consulting companies oftentimes sell hours, like your mechanic sells hours. And that wasn't a business that I wanted to stay in. It was just draining. And I started to think differently. And I remember going to my president and saying, you know what, there's an interesting market in California where these pollutant rights actually have market value. We have clients there. Why don't we work with those customers, invest our time, look at ways that we can reduce those pollutants and then sell them into the California market with some broker assistance, because we didn't know the sales process, and then take part of a percentage of the proceeds. And my president looked at me at the time with like deer in the headlight looks, like, what? Like, you're going to invest how much time to do this? You know, it's too risky. You know, let's look at selling hours. And so I knew, you know, that at the end of the day, I was thinking differently than my firm was at the time. And then in 2003, I went to Smeal. My president did support me through the Smeal MBA program. And that was the second year of the executive program held out of Philadelphia. I had 19 students in our class, I think it was. It was really small. Dennis Sheehan was leading the program, just an amazing guy. I learned so much from Dennis in finance. And the whole Smeal team was just amazing, just an amazing network. During that time, you know, what was pivotal for me in the program was certainly the international immersion trip. We went to Singapore. We studied businesses in Singapore. We chose to network with a bunch of businesses, mobile chemical, air products, and others, as opposed to taking on one case study. I think we did it because it was the easier, softer path. We didn't want to sit in offices and solve one company's problem. It was an awful lot of fun just networking with various companies, looking at their business model in the Southeast region. And then at the same time, I was also passionate. My wife and I started, we became Rotary Youth Exchange parents. We found out we couldn't have children back in the early 2000s. And we decided to be parents. And my first exchange daughter, who's my goddaughter now, was from France. And she moved in with us in 2004. So right during all the craziness of my executive MBA program, I was getting the experience of having an exchange daughter for the first time living in our house out of France. So I really became passionate about international. The Kyoto markets were starting to happen there. If anybody followed that was, you know, the United States wasn't part of the Kyoto platform. We didn't sign that agreement, but it was happening. All of a sudden, international discussions around putting a price on that externality of CO2, of carbon dioxide. So that was exciting. I got out of the MBA program, and, you know, pivotal moment, you know, the one thing that I thought as a pivotal moment, and it has nothing to do with climate change, was me feeling confident to take risks with the skills that I received from Smeal and thinking about things differently. So the first thing that I did when I got out of Smeal is I started to buy pretty large commercial properties, not because it had anything to do with my job, but because I was passionate about commercial properties. And, you know, I realized that I didn't need to be a millionaire to buy $1 million buildings. And I realized, this was before the bank collapse, is that you could actually do some pretty cool strategies around subordinate debt and, you know, going to the bank and not needing 20% down to buy these big commercial properties. And I took risks. And that was really because I was confident that I could do so. And a lot of that confidence came from Smeal. So I was thinking differently. And since then, I bought a couple commercial properties, and I still in the commercial space as a side passion of mine. But that was kind of that entrepreneurial spirit that I received out of Smeal, and really creative financing was a core part of that. So I left my firm, which is not what they wanted. You know, it was a 3-year handcuff that I had with my firm, OBrien and Gear, at the time. And one of my important lessons to everybody is networks are so important. Is that, you know, I stayed there a year. I decided that the markets internationally under the Kyoto Protocol were hot. You know, I wanted to be involved in international business. And I went to my president and I said, you know, I'm sorry, Terry. I know you supported me in the executive MBA program, but I've made a decision to leave. And I paid the firm handsomely for, you know, the 2 years that I committed to that I didn't fulfill. I owed the firm a payback, and I didn't go back And I didn't look at it as a way I could squirrel out of the agreement. I didn't look at it the way that, oh, well, good luck suing me. I'm not going to pay you that money. It was an acknowledgement that they supported me, they paid for it, and I owed them back, and I paid them. So I actually am one of the few people who paid quite a bit of money to enter the international carbon markets. It cost me dearly to do that, but I knew that I needed to. I knew that the markets were happening. And so when I left and I started on the international carbon markets, I went to work for a company that was full of finance experts. They knew how to launch IPOs. They were headquartered out of Ireland, traded on the London Stock Exchange. They did an IPO there. It was the first company globally that was actually reducing carbon dioxide and trading it around the globe. So I was passionate about that. I ended up working with them. And I think what it did was look at my career of 16 years of doing things conservatively, coming up with solutions, a company that didn't want to take risks, to a company that on the other side of the spectrum, that was absolute risk takers. I mean, they raised 200 million sterling and actually lost 200 million sterling. And at that time, I think it was almost a 2-to-1 ratio as far as sterling to the US dollar. So that was a lot of money to lose. And so I got to work with that company. I was a globetrotter. I had a passport full, pages, added pages, because I was in every country all the time trying to find ways to reduce carbon dioxide and trade it globally. And I learned a lot of lessons there with the company that went bankrupt, is that we couldn't do everything, be everything to everybody, and that we really needed to focus more. And what that firm didn't do is that they didn't come with strong engineering solutions or business. They had the business acumen, but not the technical. So when we started ClimeCo, my real mission at ClimeCo was to create a project. And the photo that we have right here is my first one. Is we had to create a market, that we could reduce greenhouse gases and again, convince an industry to do that. This is a fertilizer production facility here. We had to convince an industry that doing something voluntarily was a good business strategy, and that actually we had a market where we could sell those reductions once they were officially certified and they become fungible, tradable certificates. That we had a market to do that, and we actually had buyers out there willing to pay for those credits as part of their carbon neutrality objectives. So when we started ClimeCo, my goal is just to get a project built. I was tired of traveling all around the globe, not accomplishing things. I wanted to focus in North America, and we did. And we started to build projects and really build the business. And lastly, I would just say before I end that it was not easy. I white knuckled it. Started the company in 2009, couldn't raise capital. I think all we were able to raise is $600,000, which is not a lot of capital, and it was painful. And I invested everything. I liquidated my 401k. My wife went back to work as a social worker to try to pay for bills. We were all in, and during that time, right when I was at the cusp of not knowing whether or not I was going to fulfill my dreams at ClimeCo, a big company came to me and said, "Hey, we really like what you're doing. Why don't you join us instead?" And the pivotal moment that I had was a real reflection with my wife and the question of, do I want to go work for a big company? And she said to me, "How close are you to success?" And I said, "I think we're close. I think we're a month or so away." This is a year and a half, 2 years into ClimeCo with no income. And she said, "Well, turn them down, do it, live your passion." And when I did that to this firm, I said, "No, thank you. I'm going to continue on this path." What they said is, "Well, that's amazing, Bill. Congratulations on your decision. How can we help you be successful?" And what that company did was, on this project that you're looking at, we were creating reductions of carbon that weren't going to be actually materialized for about a year in the future. They said, "Well, we believe that you're going to do this. We believe that you're going to be successful. We're going to pay you for those credits now because we know that that money is going to help you build your business." And that is all about relationships and trust. And that company is still a great partner of ours today. So yeah, that's my story. And I think, Jennifer, I hope that gives a little bit of background of the path to ClimeCo.
Yes, that is very helpful. Thank you so much, Bill. And your risks have certainly paid off. I would like to turn now to the subject of your expertise with environmental finance. Having a strong understanding of finance is probably one of the most versatile skill sets we can have today. And I know that you have really gone deep with this. Can you tell us more about how this became an interest, and also maybe how you scout for talent these days when you're looking for people who share this skill set?
It was I talk about finance a lot in Dennis and Smeal, and I always say, the accounting really, I went through it, had to do it, didn't really care for it, but I love finance. And so, to me, to be able to put a price on the externality of CO2 that nobody was being tasked with, everybody was emitting it into the atmosphere, and had no reason to not do it. I mean, there wasn't an opportunity to create a revenue stream, or there wasn't an incentive to do that. So I think the Kyoto world definitely opened me up to creative financing when I was working with this international company, and we certainly brought that into the United States. But it all starts with credibility. And I think, there's a lot of companies out there that are going to say, I've reduced my emissions by what I did, or by my credits. And, in the United States market, in order to do environmental finance, we needed to make sure that we had a program in place with registries, with auditors, with protocols that, we had to establish the market. And right now there are 3 registries, and each registry has a protocol. What's a protocol? A protocol says, this is what I'm going to do to reduce emissions. These are the emissions before my technology went in. These are my emissions after. And that delta, is something that can become a tradable commodity or carbon credit, but it has to go through third-party audits. It has to go through registries. It has to be serialized. It becomes a tradable, fungible commodity that you can sell to somebody, and you're selling them the right. What are you selling? You're selling them the right to claim that 1 metric ton, 1 credit equals 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide equivalent reductions, and then they can apply that against their own emissions and take claim to that. So, when a company creates that and sells it, they can't claim that themselves, or that's double counting. So the entire finance part is everything about our business. And what I look for, in talent, I know that's something that we're going to get into more, is, that entrepreneurial spirit, that, understanding, pro formas, what's a good investment thesis look like? What are the risks to that investment thesis? How do we hedge market risks in a market that's opaque? How do we, take risks, but not take exuberant risks where if we have a loss, we're going to have to shut the lights off of the company. So, it's really important to understand hedging and a strong investment thesis on our projects.
Thank you. And this may sound simplistic, but one of the most helpful exercises that we could all go through in career transitioning is to conduct a skill gap analysis, which can really be boiled down to these 3 elemental questions. What skills are needed? What skills do you have? Where are the gaps? I think it's important to note, and Erik, you and I have talked about this before, that in the context of our current discussion, people are going to hire you not for your passion for your sustainability or your identity as a sustainability leader. They're going to hire you for the skills and track record that you have that will contribute to the bottom line of organizational performance. Erik, can you tell us a little bit more about what skills and competencies you're focusing on right now to help train our students for the sustainable workforce in business?
Yeah, absolutely. Bill, thanks for your story. Boy, there's a lot in there. I look forward to following up with you on at some point. That was great. I think one of the things, just to pick up from what Bill said, that's a kind of a larger point for folks out there just interested in how markets can deal with social and environmental problems, is don't miss the lesson here from carbon. It's the same lesson we learned from addressing acid rain, which is if something doesn't have a price, the markets don't know what to do with it, right? As soon as something has a price, then the marketplace can do its magic. So that's kind of, and so to get to your question, Jennifer, I think we might return later, but one of the things I'll say now that you and I've talked about, I think one of the traps or the mistakes that students can make in this area is to lead with their passion. And that's a kind of a hard thing to say. I have a hard time even saying it, even right now. I have a hard time saying it to students in particular. But the reality of where most companies are with this topic, and most firms, investment firms, is that they're going to hire you because of your skills. And by skills, I mean you're not necessarily in finance or accounting, but in supply chain and marketing, business analytics, whatever those sort of skills might be, risk management, actuarial science, whatever. They're going to first hire you for your skills. So to me, you want to lead off with proof and evidence from internships and past work experience that you've got the skills. And then if you can pair that to the fact that you also understand how to identify and quantify environmental and social risk, that's where there's power. And then to me, passion is like a good closer, at the end. If you've also got passion and you've got the kind of entrepreneurial spirit that Bill is talking about, to me, that's kind of the three pieces that go together. But the order of those from a recruiting conversation perspective is really important. If you just switch the order and do passion first and get to the skills later, you might have lost your window. And I'll just add one other thing that to me there's a master skill in this area that kind of cuts across business functions, and I call it SERO, SERO acronym, another acronym, but this is my own acronym. So SERO stands for social and environmental risk and opportunity. So social and environmental risk and opportunity assessment. So to me, this is the master skill, the new skill that cuts across what Bill's doing and, folks in sustainable agriculture, people that are trying to come up with the next enzyme that's going to get us to the biofuels that we need. The master skill across all of these is, as a business person, are you able to look at a business or look at an industry and do that quick social and environmental risk and opportunity assessment, right? So to me, that's kind of the master skill, to quickly kind of pick an industry, pick a business, and quickly identify, okay, here are the major social issues, here are the major environmental issues, here's how they create risks, here's how they create opportunities. That's to me kind of what I would call kind of the master skill of this space. So more I can say about that, but I'll just end it there for now.
Thank you, Erik. So start with your skill set and engage in that risk and opportunity assessment as Erik is talking about. I also wanted to make the point here that specialized or niche job boards right now are great. They're very appealing. They can be a good opportunity to learn more about relevant aspirational opportunities. So take note of what's listed here. Do use them However, strategically, going back to what Bill was saying, the focus really needs to be about building trust, credibility, and relationships. So networking should be your primary focus in how you spend your time as you've been accumulating those skills in the context of market research. Most experts estimate that between 70 and 80% of jobs are filled through networking, and only about 2% or less of jobs are filled through these online job board applications. So take note of that when you're listening to these advertisements from Indeed and ZipRecruiter. It's really not what it's being billed as. Any comment from either of you on this subject?
Yeah, I would just say, in fact, I was going to talk about this a little bit later, is that, the power of the network. I've been investing in my network for quite some time now, almost 30 years, always focused on doing the next right thing, helping others out, going out of my way. And, the power of the network is amazing. And I always say, start warm, never cold. There's many times when I was in just the sales industry, and, this cold calls are just a nightmare. Start with a warm call, and that warm call is another Smeal alum or a Penn State alum. We go out of our way. I always go out of my way. I've never been approached by a Penn State alum that I haven't responded back to. It's just a mission of mine and a goal of mine. So, start with that. Find the network. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how to get into your contact at your ideal company, because I always have a lot of thoughts on that, because that's a lot of how we started the firm is, how do you get into those decision makers? But yeah, I can't say enough, Jennifer, about what you just described with respect to, most careers are filled, or most opportunities out there are through warm networks, not job bulletins. Although I got my first job in 1991 from a bulletin board. That doesn't happen as often anymore.
Yes, I do think it's probably a point that we can continually refer to. I also wanted to underscore the value of your own personal value proposition. So everyone should have, in a short dialogue, a speech ready for exactly how they're going to provide value to a potential employer. Stay away here from focusing too much on job titles or degrees. It sounds like that is not how Bill was able to reach the status he is at today. Employers are always going to be most interested in your relevant work accomplishments. And if you can bring in quantified accomplishments here, all the better. Because remember, employers are looking for evidence of that impact. Bill, how do you express your value when you introduce yourself to others? And what are you looking for when others introduce themselves to you?
I'm a real Andy fan, communication and Smeal. And in fact, we brought Andy in to do a communication seminar for one of our team builders event. So I actually lead, it's a little bit different and maybe in my role, but I actually am passionate about other people and understanding other people and understanding what drives them. So I actually don't lead about myself. I'm passionate about them, and there's nothing like getting somebody talking about what gets them up early in the morning. So I lead with questions, actually. I think good communicators are great listeners. And I really try to hone in on my listening skills, active listening skills. I know, in Smeal, we used to talk about that as well. And I've done seminars on active listening with my team. But so I really like to understand people. And I think once I understand people and understand what quadrant they think in, it gives me a better understanding of how I can communicate with them effectively. So yeah, I think my strategy is a little bit different. I certainly don't go in with, guns a-blazing of who ClimeCo is. Certainly I'm ready to talk about how we can solve their strategies, but only until I know them better and personalize it a bit.
Yeah, I completely agree, Bill. And I like to echo the quote from Stephen Covey of seek first to understand, then to be understood. So we absolutely concur with you on the importance of listening first. Erik, what are some of your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I'm just going to build off of what you all have already said. To me, I have a sort of a personal technique that I like to use that was inspired by Bradley Cooper, actually. So if you might recall the movie American Sniper, where he played Chris Kyle, and I heard an interview with him where he said, in preparing for that character, the first thing he would do in the morning is he had somebody record all of Chris Kyle's interviews, any interview that he had, and put it on his iPhone. So what he would do in the morning is, as soon as he would get out of bed, he would put in earbuds and he would listen to Chris Kyle, because he needed to become Chris Kyle. So maybe you don't need to go that extreme, but before I meet with a potential client, because we have clients, or a potential donor, which is kind of the world I'm living in now, I literally try to think, what is it like to be this person's shoes every day? What are they concerned about? What are they worried about? What's it like in their industry? What are the pressures that they're under, such that, to Bill's point, I can have a level of compassion, empathy, and understanding, and look at the things that I can offer from their perspective, and then I can tailor my questions to things that I think they're going to be most interested in, that help me to understand what's really kind of driving them, and what their main challenges are, and main kind of areas of passion and interest are.
That's great. And the phase of career transitioning we're speaking to now is the importance of brand alignment. So as you do research into a company and you're beginning to position yourself, it's important to align yourself with that company's need and trajectory. Erik, I know that your interest in climate change has been paralleled by a growing interest in racial equity and social justice. How can you speak to these overlapping trends and how we position ourselves as a candidate ready to address both?
Yeah, I really appreciate the question. In fact, one of the things that I sort of connect that question to something that was brought up before about networks. I think one of the challenges about the reality that 70 to 80% of jobs are won or earned through networks is, it's really good if you're part of those networks, right? But if you're not part of those networks because of historical inequalities, that means that you don't have the level of access that others might, right? So I mention that just because I think it's important to mention, but also because I think it's actually potentially a business opportunity that if you can provide greater access to these networks for people that have been, minoritized or often left out because of lack of access to education, job markets and so forth, that could be an opportunity. So with regard to your second point about climate change and, environmental justice more broadly, so in broad brush, this is Bill's area, but right in broad brush, what we see is that emissions, air pollution primarily comes from wealthy nations, and the impact of those greenhouse gases, the warming, as well as the air pollution. In a study last year, was 8.4 million people a year die from air pollution. So if you look at the impact of air pollution and the impact of that air pollution on the climate and the impact of climate change, it is overwhelmingly negatively impacting poorer communities and poorer countries. And so that's just at a macro level, just an illustration of the connection between one environmental issue, that is climate change, and inequality. And so that's how they're connected. I think some data that came out of the EPA is that Black people are exposed to about 1.5 times more particulate matter than white people. Hispanics had about 1.2 times the exposure of non-Hispanic whites. That was just an EPA report that came out earlier this year. So they're closely connected for sure. So I think with regard to the second part of your question was about how can you tell whether companies are really serious about their focus on this topic?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I'll just sort of try to make things memorable. It gives three Ps. So prominence, performance, and partnerships. So what I have seen, this is maybe a helpful way. So prominence, by prominence, what I mean is how prominent on the website, how prominent in your communications with people within the company, how prominent is their discussion of the social impact or environmental impact. Is it kind of an afterthought? Do they struggle to talk about it? Or is it something that they talk about with a lot of literacy and comfort, and they use the words a lot in your conversation? Is it really prominent on the website? That's what I mean by prominence. The second P is performance. So to me, it's all about results. All about results. It's easy to say stuff, make grand pronouncements, but somewhere you got to dig into what have the actual results been, and don't be easily wowed by big numbers. Make sure that they provide the denominator so you have a sense of if they're saying they've reduced greenhouse gas emissions or they've contributed this much money, how much money is needed to actually address the problem, or what is their total greenhouse gas footprint, and that will help you better understand what their actual performance is. So I think performance, look at the results, look at their actual performance. And then lastly is partnerships. I think companies that are really sincere in this space and really focused on true impact, which takes a long time, is they have formed meaningful partnerships with, oftentimes with people, as Bill has illustrated with his story. You got to get outside of business, because social impact and environmental impact by definition are things that are studied by social scientists and natural scientists and climate scientists and water scientists and so forth. So to me, the evidence of sincerity and true impact focus is the level of partnerships they have with academia, partnerships they have with well-respected nonprofit organizations, it could be with government agencies. So I think those kinds of partnerships you could look for also. So prominence, performance, and partnerships are kind of maybe three ways of looking at whether the impact is real, and that's a company, therefore, that you'd want to be a part of.
I like this because prominence, performance, and partnerships can all be accentuated in your LinkedIn profile, which is the platform that we use as the basis for our networking these days professionally. Erik, you have a fantastic tagline or headline in your LinkedIn profile that I want to mention. How would you recommend we go about curating an individual brand on LinkedIn? You've really established yourself as a leader in this thought space. You too, Bill, really interested in your thoughts here.
Yeah, so I'll just briefly say, I think, so I'm, I guess mid-career, so it's a little bit different depending on where you are in your career. So to me, I'm at the point now where it's very clear to me what I'm good at and not good at. And the not good at list is always much longer than the good at list. Right? There's a lot of things I'm not good at. But I have seen in my work, whether it's going back to the Peace Corps experiences or work I've done in renewable energy, starting other organizations, that there are a small number of things that I do really well. And from going to leadership seminars, doing the personality test, which I recommend also, there's been a lot of self-reflection that I've done to identify, okay, this is how I can most honestly portray myself, because it's not bragging. If you can do it, it's just the way, it's just honest. So, for me, what you see on the screen here, these are things that I think people that spend some time with me, they would say, yeah, these are things that Erik does well. You don't see anything on here about engineering or analytics or accounting or sort of finance. Those are things that I dabble in because I have to have some literacy and comfort in there. But to me, I've tried to demonstrate through my LinkedIn profile, just a very honest portrayal of, this is what I bring and who I am. If you need skills in another area that you don't see reflected here, I'm not the person to work with. So I've tried to just be very honest and upfront about that in terms of the words I use. And then in the terms of the things that I, post or repost, I try to keep it along those same, themes that tie back to, my skills, my areas of sort of giftedness that I've invested in.
That's great. And due to how analytic processes on LinkedIn work these days, I do need to emphasize that it's so important to use the exact keywords that hiring managers and recruiters will be using in their search terms when they scout for talent, because that's the only way you're going to make sure that you get caught in their net when they're out looking for someone to fill a certain position. Bill, I would love to turn to you and get more of your advice. What would you say to recent graduates or mid-career transitioners who are wanting to strategize their career into a sustainability-related field?
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. I think just the one thing on the LinkedIn that I would also say, I'll jump right over into your next question, is that, kind of respect the rules of engagement of LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn a lot. My firm uses LinkedIn a lot. ClimeCo does. So, please like the ClimeCo LinkedIn site. But understanding and appreciating, not jumping my degrees, and if I have somebody that's a third degree, I'll work with or a second degree, I'll work with a first degree to get to the second degree. But I respect it. I don't like to get bombarded with people who have LinkedIn Pro and send me things that aren't networked well. So it's not. So I always tell people it's not Facebook. I use it a lot, and I've gotten a lot of great opportunities off of LinkedIn doing it right. And so does my firm, actually. It's really an important platform for us. I think strategy as far as, what should they be doing to kind of shift into this career? I think somebody had mentioned it before, Jennifer, you probably did, is be current. We were just talking to our team on being current and the importance of everybody, and even within ClimeCo, to not be afraid to spend an hour reading current affairs. Spend some time to do it, because at the end of the day, opportunities come out of understanding what's happening today. So keep our head above water and read up on things, understand what the market drivers are, invest your time into this space. I remember a friend of ours, Erik, and he knows who I'm talking about, graduated Smeal and wanted to get into the ESG world. And I won't call him out, but he started an ESG platform on LinkedIn that grew tremendously.
Yeah.
And his background was environmental compliance. It wasn't ESG. And now he's the leader of a big corporation's ESG platform, because he went out there and really networked well, but stayed current, understood where the market was heading. I saw another one is be flexible. I think about one of the ladies that we hired that is just magnificent on our team. And her background was actually, more ecological and, working at zoos, et cetera, before she joined. And then I ended up putting her on a really complex protocol to reduce CO2 emissions from the largest point source in North America. This is like 10 million tons a year, a project that we have. And I didn't know how she would do. And I came to find that she was amazing working in the industrial arena, working on a protocol to help a big industrial reduce their emissions, because she was really passionate about quality and a protocol that would do it right and create a project that would create a lot of value for our customer. So you never know once you get into a firm exactly where you're going to end up, but be flexible. And I think find a culture that fits, so, we are really about a culture. What people used to say, what keeps me up at night? And it really isn't financial. It matters. It's a team break. It's a culture break. It's a misalignment. It's a poor communication. It's being rude to others. So our culture is really one that, we want to be able to be open, and the culture is really important. And so when I say be flexible, I used to tell Erik about Good to Great, which is an area where, Jim Collins and Good to Great was a really impactful book for me, but it was always about, for ClimeCo, getting the right people on the bus and not being so set on exactly what seat you're in. I loved the back seat as a kid, in the bus. That's where I was. I wasn't a front seat kind of guy. But when I get on the bus now, or I ask people to come on the ClimeCo bus, if they're so concerned about what seat they're in and exactly what they're going to be doing every day, maybe our environment isn't right for them. So those are some points, Jennifer, that through my lens, I hope that helps.
It does. And on your note of being flexible and staying current, just this morning I was looking at HBR IdeaCast, which is one of the podcasts I list here. And a recent episode is on the topic of creating more resilient supply chains, led by a Harvard Business School professor. So do try to refresh yourself with the latest knowledge, especially if you're going to reach out to someone with the kind of talent that Bill has, if you have the good fortune of speaking to someone like him, like you. All right, so I wanted to move on to talking about being part of the solution-oriented COVID-19 economic recovery. This is a time of chaos and upheaval in our country and around the world, and so I definitely wanted to devote a few minutes to this before we need to move on and close. Erik or Bill, tell us more about how we can be solution-oriented as we network and as we interview with our target companies. What are some of the pain points that companies like yours, Bill, need addressed right now?
Erik, do you want to start first, or you want me to go?
Go ahead. You're on a roll.
Okay. So some of the pain points that we see is that it's like drinking from a fire hose right now. So right now after COVID, the attention to climate has been amazing. And the amount of opportunities that ClimeCo has to look at and decide, do we want to take this opportunity on? Is it a shiny object? Is there a real business thesis here? So is really important. So I think, filtering opportunities, how are we filtering what we're seeing and how do we pick the winners is something that's really a challenge for us, because we get calls all the day with really creative people. But is that really an opportunity that we want to finance and develop and spend our team's time on? So filtering opportunities is important. Capital, it's such a growth market. It's been such a change, since March. And, we didn't know if it was going to be Armageddon, March, April, things got kind of quiet. And now all of a sudden, if you're reading the news about climate, there's some groups out there right now that, are looking for the voluntary markets to grow 100-fold. McKinsey's doing a study with some banks, et cetera. And there's a big task force out there looking to grow the markets. The amount of calls that we get from folks that want to invest in ClimeCo or are looking to deploy capital are pretty magnificent. So, but understanding how to raise the capital, understanding what's the right capital to raise is important for us right now. What's the right combination of debt and equity? Is equity our most expensive capital, or should we look at more quasi debt structures? So, but it is a challenge. And I think, hiring during COVID as well. We just brought in 2 individuals during COVID. We didn't lay anybody off. And we're growing the company, but one of the individuals we brought in was a warm contact. The other was relational. So the first one was somebody that interned with us, so we knew. And the second one was somebody that came through our network, and we interviewed her remotely. She's actually in State College. We have a State College office right down on College Ave. And we brought her into State College just to close the office. So we relocated her to work out of her apartment in State College because the State College office is closed because it's not essential. So that's been a bit of a challenge. So I think we are such a people culture that interviewing over Zoom or over Microsoft Teams and to get to know folks is a little bit of a challenge, but we're ready for that challenge because that's the new market. There's opportunities here. We can, in this virtual market that we're in, we were always virtual. We have like 4 brick and mortar offices, 3 now, but most of our team is virtual. So we were used to this, but a virtual environment opens up opportunities. There's a lot more opportunities right now. Because companies like ours are saying, you know what, we don't need to always travel. We don't always need to be together. This remote workforce is really working. So I think it's a great opportunity.
I think so too. Sustainability careers have been trending and the future is already here. So we can look forward to this being a definitive aspect of our recovery in the next few years. I want to then turn the conversation over to Cindy because I know that we have attendees with questions today and we would love to hear even more insights from you, Bill and Erik.
Well, we just really have one question here. I had some pre-submitted questions as well. The first question is they want to know, as a recent graduate, supply chain, how can I make myself stand out while seeking a job in the environment industry when I lack direct experience within the field?
Well, I got to say, supply chain is everything in our space. So that should be pretty easy. And we could probably help you with that. But I think if I think about the challenges of our clients, it's understanding, their emissions, so my lens is always really more on the climate and carbon dioxide. I think Erik stated that well. It was a lot bigger than what ClimeCo does. But I think in our world, our clients are focused on their scope 1 carbon emissions, which are within their facility, their scope 2, which is their electricity use, which is on the grid power, and then scope 3, their supply chain. And I think there's a big gap in the supply chain and understanding, how to account for supply chain impacts to a company. How are they taking into account the supply chain emissions? What's it mean to them to start to report their scope 3 emissions? So I think the correlation, and I love supply chain in business school. I think it was amazing and fun. And I often think about and apply supply chain just into our business. Like, what's the supply chain of ClimeCo? So I think the background is fantastic. I think folks are being really challenged with modifying their supply chain, understanding the impacts of their supply chain. What's it like to contract with somebody in your supply chain that isn't following the standards that your corporation follows from an ESG standpoint, perhaps from a social standpoint or a governance standpoint, let alone the E standpoint, the environmental. So a lot of focus in supply chain in the climate world. So I think, there's a great opportunity out there for folks with supply chain backgrounds.
Can I jump in on that too? Cindy, Jennifer, Bill?
Sure.
So one of the things, a couple of things I want to mention, and I remember Jody, who asked that question. So Jody, it's great that you're here. So one of the things I want to mention that's a resource actually out of Jennifer and Cindy's office that we started earlier this year is something called the Smeal Sustainability Alumni Network. So if you just Google Smeal Sustainability Alumni Network, it'll bring you to a Tassel page, or it might take you to our page, but then you can easily navigate there. So I would strongly encourage you to join the Smeal Sustainability Alumni Network. Going back to Bill's comment, Jennifer's comment earlier, in the sense that, a lot of jobs happen through networks. This is the whole reason we're creating this network, is to increase your network for folks who want to work in this space. So anyone who's listening, can join, even if you're a current student. Soon you will be an alum. So I encourage you to join the Smeal Sustainability Alumni Network. And then the other thing that I don't think we've mentioned yet, Jennifer and Bill, is it's just one of the things you can do is there's a lot of stuff you can do on the side while you're building your skills and maybe a conventional job, which it maybe sounds like Jody has. So volunteering, whether it's locally or nationally, or, find a nonprofit or others where you can volunteer and provide some skills and get you experience and do some projects. Don't forget, maybe there's an opportunity for a side hustle. A lot of side hustle, gig economy stuff that you can do. I have students that have already started YouTube channels where they're just, it gives them an opportunity to take what they're reading and learning and listening to and, and share it with others. And so there's a lot of stuff you can do on the side, volunteering, side hustles, in addition to just, being excellent at your job every day. That's one of the best things you can do to build the future, is to be excellent right now. And then the last thing I've mentioned is certainly there's an opportunity to go back and, get more education, earn more degrees. I'd be remiss if I don't mention Smeal does offer a business sustainability strategy graduate certificate. It's a 9-credit certificate. It's built just for students who want to work, in this field. There's a course in supply chain sustainability strategy development, and a course in essentially change management and strategy execution. So encourage you to check out the grad certificate in business sustainability strategy.
Okay, we're running a little late. Did you guys want to take one more question that we have? Do you have time, or?
Yeah.
Okay. One more question. When you imagine the world 10 years from now, and in respect to climate change impact and solutions, as well as environmental justice, and how business play a role, what does a snapshot of the world look like? I know that's not a quick question to answer.
Erik, would you like to give your thoughts on that first? Or?
So what does a snapshot of the world look like in 10 years with regard to these issues and the business response? Is that kind of the answer? Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Ooh, that is a big one. Yeah, I would say, well, in 10 years, it's going to be 2030. 2030 is a very important year, Bill knows, particularly in the climate area with regard to, it's really, well, and Jennifer knows also, 2030 is really, the year where scientists have drawn a line in the sand to say by 2030 is really when we've got to, reduce emissions by a substantial margin. So I think there's one of two possibilities. This is kind of a scenario analysis, strategic foresight opportunity in like 30 seconds here. So one possibility is to say that businesses, for the most part, are going to, from now until then, do things that are mostly performative, that are probably going to kind of mainly look good, but not do much with regard to actually reducing greenhouse gas emissions, if we just stay with climate change, for example. And things will probably get worse before they get better, because we've already loaded so much, climate changing gases into the atmosphere. So that's not a great future, but that's certainly possible. Everything we needed to know about climate change we knew in 1979. Just read a good book on that called Losing Earth. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is because of 2020, we look back and see, and Bill was talking a little bit about this, there's been such an awakening as to both the inequalities that have existed in the world and our impact on the environment, that this is a resurgence of interest, and that we have legislation, both nationally and internationally, treaties and so forth, that set a level playing field and create markets so that markets can go to work to reduce things like greenhouse gas emissions, and that we've created a playing field where to be great, you've not just got to be the best in the world, but to be the best for the world. So that would be the other scenario, which is what we're trying to build.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think industry has a huge role. I think industry is being pressured from investors. A lot of you have seen the BlackRock communication, saying that they're not going to invest in high carbon intensity companies. A lot of our clients are getting calls from BlackRock at the board asking what they're doing about their emissions and their supply chain emissions. Shareholders are pressuring boards, individual shareholders are pressuring boards to be more sustainable. So I do believe in the markets. I think it will get worse before it gets better. We just need to slow up the curve and try to reverse it a bit. But I do, there's some big announcements that are out there. If you look, even the oil and gas folks, Shell with a $300 million commitment to look at ways to sequester carbon, and the list goes on and on. So, hopefully as industries continue to feel the pressure, they start to look at the value of their brand and the value of reducing their footprint and the importance that means to their shareholders. So I think industry has to have a huge role. We really like to push that it's a combination of nature. Everybody talks about nature-based projects, and it's easy if you're in industry to look at ways to invest in nature-based projects. It's harder to look internally. So we really stress the importance of looking within the fence line of what you can do, and also where you can invest your capital to make a difference. But the next 10 years are going to be really interesting to see how they unfold. I think we always talk in our business, the carbon markets will probably look a lot different. I think a carbon credit, or the commodity that we're trading now, may not even exist 10 to 20 years from now. Now we're starting to talk about what's a green ton of concrete look like, or what's a green product look like, or is that a tradable product? Can you sell that in the market to create change? And there's a lot of other things that we look at too. Where's blockchain going to come in? We don't see it disrupting or bringing value to our sector currently, but keeping a keen eye on that as well. But there's a lot of change. But industry's got to be part of the solution. It has to be. And, we don't deal as much with environmental justice. We work with them in some of our markets. Certainly in California, EJ community is really strong, but we can't wait for the next 10 years, but it's going to get a little bit worse before it gets better. Right now, we're seeing a lot of dramatic climate change, and we're going to continue to see that.
Well, a final thanks to our knowledgeable panel for volunteering their time and expertise. Special thanks to Julie Hetrick, our fall intern, Jim Force and Kevin Hubler, Smeal's technical support, and Wellington DeCastillo, our video editor, for their hard work behind the scenes. We hope you found this webinar helpful. Watch your email for a brief post-webinar survey to get your feedback and information on how to view this webinar at a later date. For additional questions on webinar content, please email our panelists at the addresses on the screen, and remember to place Penn State webinar question in the subject line so that they can identify you as an attendee. Our next two webinars are on October 7th. We have Business Success, Efficient, Effective with Everlasting Good Habits. The presenter is alumnus Brian Drury, who is a habit transformation coach, best-selling author, motivational speaker, entrepreneur, as well as a planning analyst at Vans, a division of VF Outdoors. On October 21st, Smeal alumna Renee Baker, who is the head of Advisor Inclusion Networks at Raymond James, will be presenting Leading with I, Fostering an Inclusive Workplace. Renee has a real passion for this topic, so I hope you will register. Smeal Alumni Career Services is again sponsoring a digital executive group coaching program through Experiential Insights. The start date is October 5th, so please reach out to our director, Kelly Asbury, to find out more. This is just one of the many great resources offered by Smeal. We have continued to develop our Smeal Lifelong Learning podcast program. Our most recent episodes are related to impact careers and career advice from Smeal executive recruiters. Watch for more episodes to release through the fall. You can visit our website or download the episodes through Apple, Speaker, CastBox, or most podcast apps and become a subscriber. Registration for all our events can be found in Smeal's LinkedIn group or on the Smeal Alumni event website calendar. As a final reminder, visit our website for links to access all our events and resources. Thank you for attending today and being a great audience with great questions. Please tune into our next webinar on Wednesday, October 7th. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Stay safe out there. Thanks again to our panelists. Thank you, Jennifer, Erik, and Bill.
You have a good day, everyone.